Good morning. Alrighty, welcome. We come to our final Port Talk about Australia today. I know, we have almost completed our circumnavigation. And so we just have one port remaining, and it's a big one, and it is Sydney. But before we get to that, I have some photos to show you. Thank you to those of you who have been sharing your photos with me. A few of them to share with you now. A couple of them from a couple of ports ago. Sometimes the mail service on board is a little slow. But I did notice you didn't put a first-class stamp on it. So the Lido napkin goes on tour again. This was in Port Lincoln. It's a well-travelled napkin, this one now. And now we're going to Melbourne next with the donuts. It's a clever way of doing it. A clever donut there. Now we're skipping ahead to Port Arthur, and we're in prison. I did ask for a picture of some convicts, and one of you actually saw convicts that had tried to escape. And this is what happens to convicts that try to escape. So thank you very much indeed for your photos. Always a good laugh. Wonderful. Let's get talking about New South Wales. So first of all, we have the flag up. I've got a little trivia for you in a moment, but this is the flag of New South Wales. Flag is pretty similar to the others in terms of it's the British Navy ensign flag, and then it's been what's called defaced with. I know it's funny, isn't it? But it's been defaced with something here, and this is the state symbol. You've got the lion in the middle, and they call it the Lion in the South. This is the nickname for the flag, Lion in the South, because you've got the 8 studs, Southern Cross there. And then you've got the lion in the middle. In theory, it's supposed to symbolize the birth of the colony at the time, birth of the colony representing the country that it came from, but also the lion going forward to create its own future independently. So that's the sort of symbolism of it. It's combined sovereignty and connection to the old country. There are 8.166 million people who live in New South Wales. So remember when we were in Tasmania, there were 500,000 people who lived in the entire state. It's a little bit bigger here. This is a real heart of the population of Australia. It's also where it all started in terms of European colonization. So it does make sense from that perspective that New South Wales remains one of the most populous parts of the country. If you wanted to refer to the people here, it's a little bit clunky, but they are New South Welshmen, which just doesn't have a ring to it at all. But in Sydney, they go by something else, and they are Sydney-siders. So, yeah, Sydney-siders. So, you could be a New Yorker or a Sydney-sider. Anyway, you don't drink them, different sort of cider. They've got a state bird here, the kookaburra, and kookaburra, a laughing bird, very happy bird. The state mammal. I didn't realize that states needed to have a state mammal, but they do. It's the platypus. Platypus. My socks have platypi on them today. The state mineral is the black opal. So if you are looking for opals, which you'll find all over Australia, but if you want to get something here in Sydney that is representative of the place, then look for black opal, because that's their thing. And their state motto, which we'll come back to in a little bit as well, is Orta recens quam pura nites. Exactly. It's Latin for newly risen, how brightly you shine. So that's the state motto. We'll return to that in a minute, but I've got a trivia game for you first. So please do shout out. No manners required here. I've shown you all of the flags now as we go around Australia, with the exception of Canberra. So shout out what flag this is. I heard it. It's Northern Territory. Northern Territory. And it is the state in Australia that has, well, it's not a state, it's a territory, the largest percentage of the population being Aboriginal Australians. Which one's this? Queensland, yes. Right at the very beginning of our time around Australia, Queensland, our first 3 ports. What about this one? Well, from the laughter, I think you've got it. Yes, it is New South Wales, our next port of call. This one here, we just came from there. Yep, Tasmania. This one here. Victoria, yes, with the St Edward's crown there at the top. This one here. Western Australia, and they've got the black swan as their state bird. And the final one here. This is South Australia. South Australia, by the way, this used to be the flag for the Northern Territory as well. Because remember, South Australia used to control the whole column, top to bottom. And then it split because they were going to go bankrupt. So there you go, a reminder of the various flags as we've circumnavigated the country. Let's put the map back on the screen, and you can see that we started our journey in Australia here. That was in Brisbane. We've gone all the way around now, dipped down to Tasmania, back up here to Sydney along the New South Wales coastline. So, I mentioned to you before the state motto, Orta Reckens Quam Pura Nites, which means newly risen, how brightly you shine, which is slightly ironic as a motto for New South Wales, because newly risen, correct. How brightly it shines, not correct. It actually took quite a while for it to start to shine. Nowadays, absolutely, it's an incredible place. But it didn't have the smoothest of starts. It was the first colony of this massive island nation. And there wasn't enough food for people. And then what they did to make things worse was they sent more people. And there wasn't enough food for the first group of people. There certainly wasn't going to be enough food for the second group of people. And Captain Cook, when he'd first come around here, he reported of this lush greenery. And so there was this assumption that he was right. But where they'd landed, it was boggy, it was marshy, it wasn't lush greenery. It wasn't the sort of land that you could grow things on. And it wasn't until people started exploring a little bit further afield into this area that we now call New South Wales, that they were able to find places that they could farm, and finally they were able to create a life for themselves where they weren't starving. But the first few decades of colonization here were far from comfortable. They weren't how brightly you shine at all. And then suddenly it really did take off. It became a colony, the colony of New South Wales, in 1788. Colony of the British Empire at the time, and that was right the way through to 1901. At this point, there was no Australia. It was the colony of New South Wales. That was it. And then, no, we're not talking about Victoria. Victoria was Melbourne, down here. We're talking here. So New South Wales then went south. Victoria didn't exist, they just called it New South Wales. New South Wales went north. They didn't call it Queensland, it was still New South Wales. New South Wales went to Tasmania. It wasn't called Tasmania, it was New South Wales. And then, over time, these other territories and states became independent from New South Wales. And so, Van Diemen's Land became independent from New South Wales in 1825. That was the first one. Then South Australia, into the country, became independent of New South Wales in 1834. New Zealand was New South Wales for a period of time. They became separated in 1841. Victoria became separated in 1851, and the final area to rid itself of the New South Wales name was Queensland in 1859. So at this period of time, Australia was the colony of New South Wales. And then slowly, the states began to form their own, at the time they were own colonies, and they were just given self-government, or responsible government was the terminology then. And then in 1901, there was the Federation of Australia. And this is the process by which 6 separate British self-governing colonies, so Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, Tasmania, South Australia, and Western Australia, agreed to join up in a confederation, the Commonwealth of Australia. And this was when Australia became a federal state. But here's something I find very amusing, and then we're going to get into talking about Sydney specifically. When they decided that they wanted to join together and create a new state called Australia, they put in process all of the right legal frameworks to create a new independent federal state of Australia. Now that country, that sovereign country of Australia, was not British. It was an independent country. It happened to have the British monarch as the monarch, but there was no connection with Westminster and the government in London. The British government had no control over Australia. Here was the issue. The British government never had any control over Australia because it didn't exist. It wasn't a legal construct. And so a construct that didn't exist can't become independent from somewhere that didn't believe it existed. So there was a quirk in Australian law for about 70 years where Australia, the whole country, was an independent country. But each of the states in Australia was still British. And so Australia as a federal country could create its own laws and didn't have to check with Westminster and all these things. But technically speaking, if any state created a law, it was British. And it took until 1986 for that to be corrected. And the act, if you're interested, is the Australia Act of 1986. And finally, after that, Westminster was totally removed from Australian legislative processes. All right, let's talk about Sydney. So there are a couple of different ports in Sydney, and we are going to be in White Bay. So that's important to recall which one we're going to be in. White Bay, the newer of the terminals here. It's won some architectural awards, which makes it hugely exciting to visit. I'm putting every positive spin I possibly can on this. And I do recommend you take the tour of the terminal. Actually, it's more convenient than people think. So I'm going to explain a little bit about how to get around from White Bay. White Bay was built as an alternative for the overseas passenger terminal. The overseas passenger terminal is the one that you might know of as Circular Quay, the one that's opposite the Opera House. We are not going to be there because there's a larger ship in at the same time as us, and they can't fit in White Bay. So generally speaking, the smaller ship will always go to White Bay. The larger ship will stay in the overseas passenger terminal. But White Bay is a well set up terminal, and it's got a complimentary shuttle bus that runs us in as well. So that's fairly well set up. There is also a ferry terminal here if you wanted to head on further on the water. Let me put it in on a map for you in a moment, but just to point out the symbols. There are toilets inside the terminal area, and there's a cafe, and there are taxis that wait outside, but there's no Wi-Fi in the terminal here in White Bay. Here it is on a map for you. As you can see, Sydney is a far larger city than many of the other places that we've been visiting. It's got real distinct neighbourhoods and districts. But we're where the ship is, in the circle, and that's about 3 kilometres, just over 3 kilometres from Darling Harbour. Darling Harbour is where I've put the box. Now that's roughly a 10-minute drive. Depending on traffic, that could stretch up to 20 minutes. If it's chock-a-block traffic, it could get to 30 minutes. But the bit that causes the traffic going from White Bay to Darling Harbour is crossing the bridge. That's the bit that sometimes becomes a bit of a bottleneck funnel. Apart from that, it's an easy journey and it's not particularly far. Darling Harbour is a great place for the shuttle to be dropping us off at because there's a lot that's there, very close by and within easy walking distance. But some of you will want to get to Circular Quay area because you want to go to the Opera House and that region. And so that's the dotted line with the sort of the orange haziness around it that I've drawn in. There are two ways that you can get there. I've put the way that I prefer, and that I'll talk to you about what the other way is. So the way I prefer to get from Darling Harbour to Circular Quay is to stay on the flat. And so it's 2 roads, and it's a 2-kilometre walk. So 2 kilometres, call it half an hour-ish as a walk. And there's stuff that you can see on the way as well. It's an interesting walk if you go this way. So you're going to go off the shuttle bus, which is basically at the aquarium area. You're going to go up King Street, and then when you get to George Street, you'll turn left. So there's only 2 roads that you need to remember if you're walking from Darling Harbour to Circular Quay. You need to remember King Street, and then you turn left onto George Street. Then you're going to walk the entire length of George Street, and when you get to the end of it, you're at Circular Quay. So actually, it's very easy to do. It's a 2-kilometre walk to do it. The other way that you could do it is to take the pink route, which is this one. The pink route is onto the bridge. So that road leads onto the Sydney Harbour Bridge. The difference is once you get to Circular Quay, you're above Circular Quay because you're on the bridge. So then you need to climb down the bridge to get into a neighbourhood called the Rocks. And that's fine because they've got ropes. They've got stairs, but personally I find that a more difficult route because of the stairs and the climbing. So one way is a little bit flatter, one way gets you onto the bridge. Now, of course, you could walk onto the bridge and then cross the bridge, which is a nice thing to do anyway. But they're my 2 best ways to get to Circular Quay and the Rocks. But I think you'll find that where we're being dropped off in Darling Harbour is more convenient for everything apart from the Sydney Opera House and the Botanical Gardens. Everything else is more convenient from Darling Harbour. So let's start to go through some of our top 10. And before we do that, actually, I've added in an extra slide. This is the various neighbourhoods that I'll be referring to during today's presentation, just so that you can see roughly how they're split. Darling Harbour, that's where we're going to be dropped off. Haymarket, that's Chinatown and good shopping. The CBD sort of flows into Haymarket, to be honest, and the 2 of them are the centre of town. The CBD part is just slightly more business, and Haymarket is slightly more leisure, but there's definitely a morphing between the 2. The Domain is over on the side closer to where the Sydney Mardi Gras is going to be. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Personally, and this is just me, but personally I don't come out further than there. Though there's stuff to see here, but I don't come out this far. I stay in this area here. And then, of course, Circular Quay is an area which I think lots of you know for the garden and for the Opera House. So let's get into our top 10, and I've already given you sort of fair warning that today's top 10 is slightly unusual in that there are more than 10 things in it. So I've blocked things together as best I can. So let's start with our top 10 in Sydney, and it's music in Sydney. This is probably the thing that most people would jump to when you say, I'm going to Sydney. That's the image that flies into their mind. And it's incredible that that is the image that flies into their mind because it was such a controversial build. There are tours. If you want to go on a tour, then it's really interesting. It's currently celebrating 50 years And there's an exhibition somewhere else, I'll talk about that in a bit, to learn about the story. But they did an international competition, an international architectural competition to design it. And I think it was a Scandinavian man who won the competition. And it was this design. The outside is very true to his design. But then halfway through the build, they fired him. Politics, internal politics, and he got fired. And then other people tried to complete the building. But they didn't do an excellent job of it. And so the inside of the Opera House is more controversial now than the outside of the Opera House, because pretty much everybody agrees that this is a monumental building that has given Sydney its place in the world visually. But the inside was a bit of a mess. So, with their tail between their legs, they went back to the architect. And they said, "We're really sorry. Can you come back and fix the mess?" And he did. So he was back on the team, and he was restoring the damage that had been done to his original design. Now, inside it is not completely true to his original design, but certain elements have now been restored to be more faithful to the original design. And one of the rooms is named after him. The Utzon room is named after the architect of the building. People often think, if they've not been inside before, they often think that it is a singular site, that there is one beautiful concert hall inside, and that's not the case. There are 6 theatres inside. So truly it's a performing arts centre. It's got 6 different theatres of different sizes inside the shells, and each one focuses on something slightly different. So tomorrow you could go to see A Midsummer Night's Dream at the Sydney Opera House. That's in the Playhouse. Or you could go to see Mahler's Fifth Symphony, which is conducted by Simone Young. That's in the concert hall, if you like classical music. Or you could go to see Gatsby, which is a cabaret night in the studio. Or you could go to the Drama Theatre to see RBG of Many One, which is a theatre. Or you could go to the opera in the Joan Sutherland Theatre and see La Traviata. But there's so much choice. There's a 6th theatre there as well, but there's nothing on in that one tomorrow night because they're installing a future production. You could go to do a backstage tour. That is very exciting. That is only from Thursdays to Mondays, so we're at the right time. And it's only once a day at 7 a.m. So, yeah. So you need an overnight in order to do it. We've got an overnight. And so if you wanted to go on Sunday morning, you could. It's very rare for people coming on a cruise ship to be able to do that tour. But you book it. Go and book it ahead. You've got to be there for 6:45 in the morning. But I know some of you are up like spring chickens at 4, so 6:45 is quite late for you. And then you get a great backstage tour. There's also an architectural tour that only runs on Saturdays, and that runs at 10 a.m., so you could get over for that one. And then there's a daily tour, just the regular one. If you're looking for more options for music, for theatre, tomorrow and Sunday in Sydney, tomorrow is probably the better day for it. There's the Jonas Brothers in town. Thought you'd be excited. There's the Enmore Theatre, there's the Oxford Art Factory, there's the Metro Theatre, the Hordern Pavilion. There are lots of options here. This is a great place to be for that. Alternatively, you might prefer sports. And you could do a behind-the-scenes tour of the Sydney Cricket Ground. That's always an option. But tomorrow, at the CommBank Stadium, which is just slightly out of town, so 30 minutes drive out there, is the biggest soccer match of the season. It's the Sydney Derby. And there are still some seats available if you want to go to it. If you like soccer, or what I call football, then it's the Western Sydney Wanderers versus Sydney FC. And this is the biggest match for Sydney of the season. It is the Sydney Derby. I went to the London Derby once. It was the scariest thing I've ever gone to. Oh my goodness me. They penned us in, and they let the other people, the fans of the opposite team, they let them go first, and they would not let the home supporters out of the stadium until they'd cleared the streets, because they thought there were going to be fights afterwards. And I told them, I'm not going to fight. museums. You've got your pick here. This is where I've slightly changed up the way I run the slides, because I've given you some ideas, because there are just too many to whittle this down to one. In Haymarket, there's the Australian Museum. By the way, all of my top picks are free, which is fantastic. The Australian Museum in Haymarket is the oldest museum in Australia, and it's the 5th oldest natural history museum in the world. They've currently got a special exhibition called Ramesses and the Gold of the Pharaohs. So if you travelled all the way to Australia to learn about Egypt, then this is for you. The Museum of Sydney, much smaller in comparison, but obviously it talks about the city itself, the past, the present. There's an area that focuses on the future as well. And their current special exhibition, if you like the Opera House and want to go there, go to the Museum of Sydney as well. They've got a special called the People's House, Sydney Opera House at 50. And it's closing in a month's time. So try and catch that one if that's of interest. Something a little bit different will be the Justice and Police Museum. It's in a heritage-listed building, the former Water Police, and it tells the story of Sydney's dark side. Now, the thing with Sydney being a convict colony to begin with, it's got a fairly wonderful dark side, and so there's loads of great stories here. My family arrived in Sydney through a couple of different reasons. Some of the family chose to come. Others had less of a choice in the matter. But actually, if there are any, most of us aren't Australians. But when we cruise in Australia with Australians, I say the name of the person. I'll say the name, but it will mean nothing to you, because actually this person turned. This is the part of the family that chose to come. He was a TV personality. He was one of the first telesales people. Joe the Gadget Man. The only person who might have heard of him is you, but no. But you're not from Sydney, are you? No. Oh no, nor would I. It's trash. Anyway, Joe the Gadget Man was the first telesales person in Sydney. He came because of really bad arthritis, and he was told by the doctor at home, "You should go to Australia because of the warmth. Will be better for your bones." The others came for reasons of multiple marriages at the same time. The final museum that I think might be of real interest is the Hyde Park Barracks. It was home to convicts, but it's been home to all sorts of people. Immigrants at one point, law courts at another point, a vaccine institute at another point. It was a printer for the government for a period of time. It's seen loads of lives, but it's a good place to go and see the story of how people built this city. That's really the story that it tells in the barracks. And they do an after dark program, so you might want to pop by and check out their after dark program tomorrow evening. There are usually live performances and food trucks and pop-up bars, and I imagine that tomorrow evening will be quite a lively evening in Sydney, which we will definitely get to in a bit. Sights. Okay, so some top picks for some really just great sightseeing. Seeing Sydney. Well, first of all, let's look away from Sydney, up into the sky. The Sydney Observatory, which was built in the late 1800s, does night tours. They first opened for the public in the 1980s, and now they do tours just a few days a week, Wednesday through Saturday. So if you wanted to do this, you've got to do it on Saturday for two reasons. First, we will have set sail on Sunday night, and the second is it's not even open on Sunday night. But when you're there, there's a talk, there's a tour, there's a 3D space theatre, and then you can view the universe through their reflecting telescope there. It is part of a wider museum called the Powerhouse. Now, the Powerhouse is the largest museum producers, slightly the wrong word, in Australia. but every other one of their sites is closed because they're building a brand new site. It's going to be state-of-the-art near Darling Harbour, but it's not yet there. Then they're restoring their other site, the original site, and so that's totally closed down at the moment as well. So this year, the Powerhouse is going through a huge renovation project and growth, but this part is open. Of course, the Sydney Harbour Bridge is not only a great view to take in of Sydney, but a great place to go to take in the views of Sydney. And there are a few ways that you can engage with the Sydney Harbour Bridge. You can go just as a regular person and walk across the bridge. That's people forget about that as an option. You can just walk the bridge. It's a long walk, it's a big bridge, but when you walk across and then you come back, you get the most amazing views back over the city. If you're feeling adventurous, you can climb the bridge, and the bridge climb goes over the top of the bridge, and it's a little bit pricey. The climb is $294 per person, and then there's obviously the optional ropes to tie you on. I think they come with the price, but not sure. This year, I think it's no, it must be more. It was built in 1932. 1932. Does that make it the 85th anniversary? No. 90? 90-something. 92. Wow, 92 years old, this bridge. They're going to start the maintenance program on it soon. It's got 6 million rivets, which means that there are more rivets in that bridge than there are people in Sydney. Fun fact. And then at the Sydney... Oh, gosh, what have I done? Oh, that was interesting. Let's try again. There we go. The Sydney Tower Eye is in the CBD. That's this building that I've got in the main photo. It's open at 10 a.m. till 7 p.m. It's a good viewing platform when you get up there. If you just want to go and see the view, it's $20. If you want to go on what they call the Skywalk, then that is $95, and it's a little bit like the bridge climb, terrifying. And you walk outside, very scary. There's also, if you prefer to do these sorts of things in a more civilized way, then there is a rotating restaurant up there as well. And you sit there and you eat, and it will rotate over an hour and a half. And so that way, at every point during your meal, you'll get a different view. And you only feel slightly sick. Finally, Mrs. McCary's chair. This is in the Botanic Gardens. It's on the corner of the Botanic Gardens. It's looking out into the harbour. And it's a real landmark, built in 1810 by convicts for Mrs. McCary. Mrs. McCary was the wife of the governor, Governor McCary, and he commissioned it because his wife, Elizabeth, loved to sit in that area and look out to sea. And so she got a chair. You can go shopping. Fantastic place to go shopping. And of course, if you do big shopping, then you can get your tax back as well. I have checked, it's $300 on a single receipt. So if you bought 300 candy bars, you could get your tax back on your 300 candy bars. So it doesn't have to be one item of $300 or more, just so long as it was on the same receipt. And there are a few options that you could go to. The Strand Arcade is probably the most attractive of the options. This is the only Victorian shopping arcade that survives in its original form in Sydney. There are others, but they've been sort of a little bit adapted here and there. But this one's very true to its original look, and it's the main picture there. Very fancy. Then there's the Westfield Sydney, which is at the base of the Sydney Tower. So if you're going to the viewing tower, you're right by that. And that's a modern shopping centre with all of the regular shops. World Square as well, pretty similar to that. It's in the CBD area. It's pretty big. It fills a whole block. and the Queen Victoria building as well. But that's a heritage listed one, which is pretty nice. And that's this. So gorgeous building you'll see in the second photo. That's the QVB as they refer to it. Alternatively, you could go to the beach. Now, Bondi Beach is another thing that probably comes to mind when you say about Sydney. You think Sydney Opera House, Sydney Harbour Bridge, and Bondi Beach with gorgeous people prancing up and down the beach in their Baywatch outfits. The nice thing about Bondi Beach is the Baywatch outfits, but apart from that, it's a lifeguarded beach, which I think is always a good idea if you are going to go swimming in the beach, to go to a beach where there are lifeguards. The lifeguards are there during the daylight hours, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. So that's when you've got the lifeguards there. You can get there on the bus if you want to, bus 333, and there are restaurants along the beach. There's also a swimming pool. If you want to go to the beach, but not swim in the sea, but swim in a swimming pool that is made of water that came from the sea, then that's an option as well. It's called the Bondi Icebergs Pool. I don't believe there are any icebergs involved. There's also Lady Jane, which is really called Lady Bay, but people call it Lady Jane. I think you'll like that, because it's a nudist beach. And I know some of you always look uncomfortable in your clothes, so this is a good opportunity to rid yourself of them. It's I find this a bit funny, but it's right by the Royal Australian Navy facility. I don't think you see so many uniforms on the beach, though. And the final beach, which is a really popular one, is Tamarama Beach, but it's nicknamed Glamorama Beach. Sydney is one of the gay capitals of the world. It's a very LGBT-friendly city, and this beach is particularly known as a very LGBT-friendly beach. Not that there is any beach in Sydney that is not, especially on the weekend of Mardi Gras. But this one has a long history of being a great location. It's quieter. It's away from the main bustle of Bondi Beach. The only thing that's worth being aware of if you go here is it's not always safe to swim. It's a little bit rougher here. Really good for surfing, but a bit unsafer if you're not a strong swimmer. Beautiful gardens in Sydney as well. The Royal Botanic Gardens are the thing. And I highly recommend going on a lovely walk through the botanical gardens. They're not small, so you could spend hours upon hours there. But you get the most amazing views back over the harbour, the Opera House, the bridge. I had a wonderful photo shoot there with a friend last year. We just had the best time running in and out of the trees, pretending to be goblins. It was great. But there are other options as well. Hyde Park, which is in the centre of Sydney, that's closer to Darling Harbour than the Botanic Gardens. That's got a museum inside of it. That's got the Anzac Memorial, so the main war memorial for the state of New South Wales, and the Archibald Fountain is there as well. So that's a lovely park to have a wander through. A little bit smaller than the Botanic Gardens. And then the other one that I put up on the picture is the Chinese Garden of Friendship, and that's in Darling Harbour. So once you get off the shuttle bus in Darling Harbour, this garden's your closest garden, and it's lovely. It was officially opened in 1988, and it was a gift from Sydney's sister city, Yangzhou, in China. And they gave this gorgeous garden. There's calligraphy and Chinese buildings and sculptures of dragons and other mythical creatures and all sorts in this garden. And you sort of forget where you are. So that's right by Darling Harbour. Of course, you could go to art galleries, and there are lots of art galleries in Sydney. I've pulled out two. These are the public art galleries, but there are lots of private ones as well. But the main two are the Art Gallery of New South Wales. This is close to the Domain, and the Domain is close to the Royal Botanic Gardens. So it's on that side. In this gallery, you've got more traditional art from sort of 1800s onwards. But then you've got the Museum of Contemporary Art, and this is by Circular Quay. Actually, it's at the base of the rocks. It's right opposite where the other cruise ship will be. And it's also free. They're both open at the same times, 10 till 5. I've not yet been to the Art Gallery of New South Wales, though I think it's probably going to be more my sort of thing. I love the architecture itself. It makes me think of the National Art Gallery in London, if you can picture that. Very, very similar facade. I went to the Museum of Contemporary Art last year. Thought it was great. Really enjoyed it. Or you could eat. I'm sure you will, at some point during your time in Sydney, have a lovely meal. Again, I couldn't possibly find it all for you. It's an amazingly huge city. But here are my 3 favourites. The Sydney Fish Market is a real institution. It stinks, of course. It's right by Darling Harbour as well, so really conveniently positioned for our shuttle bus. The thing that I think is most fun about the Sydney Fish Market, apart from the fact that you can buy very fresh fish and chips and other things like that here, you can also buy from the market and then cook it in the seafood school that is part of the market. And so then you can cook fresh seafood, and you can learn something as you're doing it as well. So that's a bit of fun. That's at the Sydney Fish Market. Alternatively, Paddy's Market's in Haymarket, so that's one road away from Darling Harbour, pretty much. Part of the main CBD area, part of the Chinatown area. Well, Chinatown is within Haymarket. It's one of the oldest. It's also one of the largest markets in Australia, not just Sydney, but in Australia. And you'll find all sorts here, seasonal produce and other stuff. But because of its connection to Chinatown, it's also got a real Asian flair to it. And so if you love Asian food, particularly at really good prices, then Paddy's Markets are a good place to go. Because one thing I will say about Sydney is it's not a cheap city. Things are more expensive here. Coffee, for example. You'll notice that the price of coffee in Sydney is a considerable few dollars more than the price of coffee in Tasmania or even in Melbourne. And same with meals. Things are a little bit pricier. But if you wanted to go out for a nice meal in a part of town that has a really nice atmosphere, then the Rocks are my go-to. I love the Rocks. It's the original neighbourhood. It's right by the old docks. It's nestled underneath the Sydney Harbour Bridge. It's a little bit hilly. They've got a street market, which is great fun. They've got indoor shops and stuff. They've got hotels there. They've got some good options for restaurants as well. It's not the cheapest part of town because it's seen as sort of a regeneration, and therefore it's been gentrified and is now trendy again. But it's just such a nice place to be. Really great atmosphere. If you really love to be ripped off for food, then you could go to the Opera House itself. Now, this is on the other side of Circular Quay from the Rocks, and there are restaurants that are on the waterfront there. There are sort of inside-outside restaurant space, and so sit wherever your preference is. You could go for lunch there. I did this last year. Really fun, because you're eating in just the most amazing place. The food isn't the most wonderful, but it's the atmosphere and where you are that's the thing that's great there. You are slightly ripped off for what you're getting, but you're really paying for your seat more than the food, I feel, in that bit. But it's a great place to check out. All right, final thing for Sydney, and then of course we continue the conversation this evening with our Q&As, and that is Sydney Mardi Gras, which happens to be tomorrow. Tomorrow night will be the parade, and this is a major event. Major event in the calendar. People look forward to it all year round. People travel from all over the world to come and join this event, and that will be no different tomorrow. It will be extremely busy. Very, very busy. you'll notice that I have avoided talking about certain parts of Sydney. I said I'm not going to come across to that side. I'll put the map up again in a minute. Well, the reason for that is I've avoided the areas that are closed a little bit to facilitate the parades. And so if you want to go to Mardi Gras and see the parade, then you are going to want to go out a little bit further. They're going to go along Oxford Street for the parade. So Oxford Street is the main street that the parade goes through. The parade starts at 7:30 and it goes through till 11. Then there's an after party, and I'm sure you're all chomping at the bit to go to the after party. There are still some tickets available for the after party, but you have to pay for the tickets. To go to the parade itself, there are just places along the street where you go and you stand and you watch and you cheer and you just soak up the atmosphere. Last year, over 250,000 spectators turned up to enjoy the parade, and 12,000 people took part in the parade. It's massive. The parade starts, this is not my terminology, this is what they call it, but the parade starts with the Dykes on bikes, and then the First Nations, and then the 78er floats. And so it's a very set tradition of how the parade runs. It's a real major event in the Sydney calendar. If you're wanting to watch it, you can really pick anywhere between Hyde Park and Moore Park, but know that the main route is through Oxford Street. The other roads that will be closed will be Flinders Street and Anzac Parade, and they're going to start closing the roads from 3 p.m. So 3 p.m. is when they're going to start blocking off, getting ready for the parade. Let me just see if I had anything else that I needed to share with you about that. Some of the public transport in the evening is going to be affected a little bit by this as well. So if you're planning on staying out into the evening, the major roads will be closed, which we've already gone through. From 7 p.m., you won't be able to cross Oxford Street. So if you're on the wrong side of Oxford Street at 7, you have to go all the way to the end of the road, and then you'll be allowed to cross and then come back. So again, just factor that in because it's a little bit unusual. And some of the stations on the route will be closed in order to control crowds. So they want people to walk further so that the crowd dissipates naturally and so the public transport isn't going to be overwhelmed. If you have any questions about this, then there will be lots of people, volunteers, out around Sydney tomorrow. So I would ask them your questions so that you can get some good advice and directions there. Let's finish up today's session with the map for you. And I've not obviously put all 47 things on the map, but I've sort of now picked out, from what we discussed, I've picked out 10. And I've also kept the names of the different districts on the map for you so you can see roughly where we are. So just to recap, we're going to be at White Bay. White Bay is going to have a shuttle bus, complimentary shuttle bus that's going to run across the bridge to Darling Harbour. That's probably going to be about a 20-minute ride on average. And from Darling Harbour, you can walk everywhere, or you can take the light rail or other public transport. You can even take a ferry that will take you round to Circular Quay. And from Circular Quay, you can get other ferries out to pretty much anywhere. The Opera House and the gardens are the main thing, and the bridge are the main thing out in that area of Circular Quay. And the rocks. The other stuff is much closer to Darling Harbour, so we're in a good place for that. And of course, we've got 2 days to enjoy it. The shuttle bus will end at 10 p.m. on the first night, and it will resume at 8 a.m. on the Sunday. There are plenty of Ubers and stuff as well, so if you want to travel outside of those times, you won't have any issues getting around town. But we'll talk more about the logistics later on at our Q&A. For now, thank you for coming, and I will see you later.